Good afternoon. I'm Emmett Kelly, a member of the CMC Board of Trustees and also a lawyer at Frost Brown Todd here in town. It's great to see everybody today. Today our forum is marijuana potpourri, or potpourri, apple or, potato or potato. This will touch on any number of controversial topics related to the legalization, regulation, and use of marijuana in Ohio. Among the many issues are public policy, health, medical applications, corporate ownership, personal freedoms, taxation, federal law, industrial raw material, controlling board, etc. This sounds like a lot of work for lawyers. Questions today will be submitted in writing. You will find a piece of paper at your table near your forum flyer. Please include your name and your question. Members of CMC's program committee will begin to collect them about midway through the discussion. The best questions will be selected for content and relevance and read aloud by our program committee volunteers during our Q&A period. Okay, allow me to introduce our speakers. Speaking today on behalf of Legalization of Marijuana Ohio as members of Responsible Ohio, who have state-approved ballot language and are currently in the process of obtaining over 300,000 signatures to make the November ballot, are Ian James and Chris Stock. Speaking against the legalization of marijuana in Ohio are Tony Coder. Tony's with the Drug Free Action Alliance, and Bob Doyle. Bob is visiting from Colorado, and he is the chair of the Colorado SAM, which stands for Smart Approaches to Marijuana Coalition. I got that right, Bob? And of course, our own CMC board member, Mike Thompson, the news and program director at WOSU Public Media and host of Columbus on the Record, will be our moderator today. We ask that each of our panelists, looking at you gentlemen, defer your conversation at the discretion or direction of Mr. Thompson. Mike, the podium is yours. I don't know where you are now. Let's provide a warm welcome for all our speakers today.
Thank you, Emmett. Thank you all for coming. This should be an interesting debate for those of us who grew up watching Cheech and Chong, laughing at Sean Penn's character Spicoli at Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and more recently went to White Castle with Harold and Kumar. This is odd. This is mainstream. Marijuana is no longer a joke. It's big business. It's used in medical treatment, and possibly could be used recreationally in Ohio and medically if this first makes the ballot and if voters approve. So we'll get to these many issues during this debate. We're going to start with some opening statements, and by virtue of a coin toss, the opponents to this measure will go first.
We're going to hear a lot today about things like social justice. We're going to hear about medicine. We're going to hear about incarceration. We're going to hear about all of these tragic circumstances in society. However, let us make sure that we know that what this is really about. This is not about any of those things. If this was about those things, then the creators of this amendment would have already thrown their money at those types of issues. However, this is about big money. This is about creating a monopoly in the Ohio Constitution to make a very small handful of individuals extremely rich. This is about marketing. This is about commercialization. This is about taking what was a drug from the 70s and 80s that we used to laugh about and creating big business which has big impacts. And we're talking about impacts on public health. We're talking about impacts on public safety. We're talking about an enormous impact on business and young people. And we actually have some really good examples coming out of Colorado and Washington right now, which is why we decided to invite Bob Doyle, who is from Colorado. He's living with what commercialization of marijuana is all about, so I'd like to introduce him to take the rest of my 3 minutes.
Thank you. Again, it's the, as someone who's worked more than 20 years in tobacco prevention, I am keenly interested in social justice. I'm keenly interested in good medicine. I'm keenly interested in compassion. Oregon, Alaska, Colorado, Washington were all sold the same deceptive messages, that it was about social justice, communities of color, and making our communities safer. And that's all smokescreen, because it's all about the mass commercialization and use of marijuana. It's about mass producing gummy bears, hash oil. Since we began commercializing marijuana under the guise of medicine in 2009, we have more marijuana positive traffic fatalities, more marijuana positive DUIDs, more people in our ER rooms with medical or marijuana on their charts, more hospitalizations, more children being poisoned, more hash oil explosions, more illegal diversion of marijuana. Our marijuana use rates for every single age group is higher than the national average. That doesn't sound like a success, but that's what you're told by the marijuana industry, that Colorado is a success. So what measures are they using to determine that?
Okay, now we'll hear from Responsible Ohio.
Thank you. Columbus Metropolitan Club, the Athletic Club, thank you for having us here today. And to the Wade staff, thank you as well for helping make this a great event. Responsible Ohio seeks to legalize marijuana possession, consumption for adults 21 and older, while also providing medical marijuana for the chronically ill who have a recommendation from their licensed primary treating physician. The reality in Ohio is this. You can call, text, or email someone to have marijuana delivered to your door in less than 10 minutes, and that's faster than you can get a pizza delivered to your front door. That's a reality. However, consumers don't know what they're really consuming. Drug dealers don't card your kids to know if they're over 21. They only care about making sure that the kid or that person has cash in hand. That's a reality. Marijuana prohibition has failed. Ohio spends $120 million every year enforcing failed marijuana prohibition. Even though Ohio decriminalized marijuana some time ago, black Ohioans are 4 times more likely than white Ohioans to be arrested for marijuana, even though the rate of consumption is nearly the same. The American Bar Association conducted a study of Ohio marijuana laws and found that a single misdemeanor conviction can have over 300 consequences, mainly inability to get licensed to work in a number of fields. Drug misdemeanors like these are even worse because they will typically mean the loss of FAFSA eligibility, which puts college out of reach for many. We can and must do better. We must. And that requires Ohio have a responsible adult conversation in which we discuss treating marijuana like alcohol. We propose creating a marijuana control commission like the Division of Liquor Control, and that oversees the tight regulation, testing, and taxing of marijuana. We propose to allow adults who are 21 and older to grow up to 4 flowering plants in their home. Plants must be secured to ensure that no one under 21 can access the plants, and the home grower must obtain a permit to do so. Home growers will not be permitted to sell marijuana, and rather than continuing to waste $120 million a year on failure, we propose to tax a market that flourishes today in every single county in Ohio. We propose to regulate the commercial sale of allowing thousands of Ohioans to own and operate the manufacturing, testing, retail stores, and medical marijuana dispensaries. To protect from underage sale, the amendment requires jail for sale. That's in the amendment. If you sell to someone who's under 21, you go to jail. You lose your license. Responsible Ohio proposes a realistic approach to marijuana, not the failed prohibition that we have today. An approach that will regulate a system currently in existence to provide compassionate care for people with chronic illnesses such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, PTSD, epilepsy, while also creating over 10,000 new permanent jobs and generating needed revenue for our communities. That's the Responsible Ohio Marijuana Legalization Amendment. We again thank you for having us today, and we look forward to discussion and the questions.
All right, I'll start with Responsible Ohio. Let's talk about the business aspect first. We saw this in the casino issue that came up and was finally passed, or was passed in 2009 after several attempts. There was big money behind it. There's big money being made by casinos, not as much as they expected, but still big money being made. There is big money behind this campaign. Is it not fueled by the tremendous business opportunity rather than the social implications of legalizing marijuana?
Well, thank you. It's actually fueled by failure. We are continuing to spend lots and lots of money on failure. it's also, as the gentleman said, there is a social injustice that occurs here. If you're black, you're 4 times more likely than whites to be arrested. If you're in Allen County and Lima, you're 13 times more likely to be arrested. And this is in a decriminalized Ohio. This is where we've decriminalized it to a point of misdemeanors, but as, again, from what the ABA is telling us, there are 300 issues that people hurdles they have to get over. So, if we keep waiting for this to be taken care of, we've waited since 1997. Bobby Hagan introduced medical marijuana in 1997. 18 years has gone by. We do not have a medical marijuana bill passed. We do not have a medical marijuana law. We have had 9 sponsors of House Bill 33 for medical marijuana in this legislative session. We had 29 sponsors for Hang On Sloopy.
Getting back to the business aspect, is there any projections on the profit margin these companies would have based on this market?
Sure, but they're going to, look, this is going to be a business. They are going to make a profit, just as anybody who owns a marijuana retail store, a manufacturer store, a marijuana dispensary system, a testing facility that's a part of this amendment will also make a profit. But what we're doing, Mike, is we're actually turning this from a black market into a legitimate market with regulation, testing, and taxing, and taking that money that's currently going into the black market and putting it into our communities where it can benefit. That is the difference.
I want to get this side to respond to that. Estimates are 7 to 8% of Ohioans smoke pot or use pot once a month. It's happening. Why not legalize it, regulate it, control it, and reap the tax benefits from that use?
Well, first off, their tax benefits are, quite frankly, ludicrous. They have claimed in multiple news reports that they're going to make $554 million in legalization. You had $44 million in Colorado last year. Now, we're twice the size of Colorado. So basically, by 2020, we're going to have to have 10 times as much marijuana sold, about 250 tons of it. So it really is going to be all about marketing. Going back to the social justice issue, what you have is, okay, yes, let's not make the social justice issue about marijuana. Let's make it about what it really is. It's about social justice, where African Americans are arrested 17 times more, they're more likely to be arrested, 17 times more likely for gambling, 7 times more likely to be arrested for murder, 6 times more likely to be arrested for rape. So instead of making this a marijuana issue, let's make this a social justice issue and actually go at it from that angle.
But if 7.5%, 8% of Ohioans are using pot now, what's the harm in legalizing it and regulating it and getting some tax money? Maybe it's not the projections they're saying, but what's the harm in getting something out of that and also regulating that more tightly?
Often people like to say Colorado's a social experiment, and I like to tell people, no, we're not, because we actually have commercialized drugs before, alcohol and tobacco, and we actually know the story, that drugs are money losers. Societal costs are far greater for alcohol and tobacco and revenue than the societal costs are far greater than the revenue you're going to make. They are money losers. I love this interest in our communities of color. I'm interested to know if they know anything about our experience with communities of color in alcohol and tobacco use. And as someone who has worked more than 20 years in communities across the country, I have not had one community ever tell me, alcohol and tobacco are working out so well, we really could use another drug in our community. In Denver, where we have the most retail and the, quote, most regulation, where we're supposed to now make everybody safer, we have 33% of African-American high school girls are using marijuana. I don't hear any outrage from the marijuana industry about that. So it's pure fiction that we're protecting. And it's interesting they say regulate like alcohol. What is the most used drug by children? Alcohol. In other words, what's the biggest black market for a drug for children? Alcohol. And that's what they say they want to be regulated like. So it's great, but their campaign sound bites don't match the substance of the issue.
Talking about you cite the unfairness that African Americans and people of color face in the justice system because of marijuana laws. Is the way to fix that just to legalize marijuana, or should you fix the justice system?
It's a multi-step process. I've I've kind of enjoyed myself sitting here and getting a chance to watch the debate unfold. I think what Bob is doing on the front end, though, let's be clear, is conflating this idea of legalization with this idea of usage of marijuana, right? In Bob's telling, if we legalize marijuana, all these social problems will inure. But if we don't legalize marijuana, none of the social problems will be here. And that's a fiction, right? I mean, what we're attempting to do here is address the reality. Light a candle instead of curse the darkness. We have a problem with enforcement. We have a problem with social justice, and I want to hit that issue on the head. But we have to recognize that we have a problem. What I hear Bob saying is, let's not even address it. Let's just continue on with the failed policies that we have right now. Let's continue on throwing $120 million in Ohio to marijuana enforcement that's not working. That just doesn't make sense to me from a public policy standpoint. So we start from the premise that a problem exists. Now, how do we deal with it? One facet of that problem is what's going on in the black community. So Mike asked, how do you address what's going on in the black community? Do you address it by simply legalizing it? And my answer would be respectfully, that's not all you do. Now, over the past 6 to 7 months, we've had a number of conversations, my golly, scores of conversations with folks in the African American community. And number one, it's not a monolith, right? When we say African American community, they don't speak with one voice. They speak with multiple voices and have multiple ideas and understandings of the dimensions of this problem. But what we hear over and over again is not, oh my gosh, if you legalize this, all of our kids will start using drugs. It's, listen, the African Americans are using this. They're 4 times more likely to be arrested for possession as compared to Caucasians. And what that's happening in the community as a monolith is that these people can't get jobs anymore.
So why not change the Constitution to fix that penalty?
It's a 2-step problem, and that's what we've been talking about. What we have put together is an initiated statute to address the issue of decriminalization. When this amendment passes, we will have signatures and we will have an initiated statute that produces expungement and decarceration for these decriminalized offenses. The draft is already written. It exists. We've been working with opinion leaders to shape the language to make sure that it writes well. And you will see that Responsible Ohio will come forward with matching grants to fund this initiated statute in 2016.
I want to move on past this because we've got several other issues to get to, and we only have about 20 minutes. Let me, to the folks who oppose this, what has Colorado seen with regards to edible products, cookies, brownies, candy, and did voters know that was going to be there when they voted on it?
So what's interesting is, again, as what I've mentioned is, go back and look at the campaigns that sold legalization to the voters in Colorado, in Oregon, in Alaska, in Washington. It was the same for out-of-state funders that funded those efforts. Not one mention of commercialization. Not one. No mention of pot shops. No mentions of mass-producing gummy bears, cupcakes. No mention of mass-producing hash oil, which for those who don't know is 60 to 80% THC, 15 to 20 times stronger than the marijuana somebody was using just in the 80s and 90s.
THC is the chemical
It's
in
a
cannabis.
psychoactive ingredient. So now this is what we have. This is what social justice looks like in Colorado. Fruit punch, cupcakes, gummy bears, any child product you can imagine has been infused with marijuana. Last week we had the young man come from Oklahoma who ate 5 marijuana gummy candies. He ended up shooting himself. We don't know yet still what may have caused that shooting. We do know we had a young man in Denver who came to visit who ate one cookie that had 6 joints worth of marijuana in it and had a cannabis-induced psychosis and jumped out of the balcony. The bottom line is that even now, quote, with regulated items, we still have these kid products. And as somebody who worked for 20 years in tobacco, where the tobacco industry told us Joe Camel's not about targeting children, here we have a marijuana industry saying that gummy bears, cupcakes, and soda are not about targeting children.
Those are the only two cases. There was also a murder as well
There
that
was,
was
yeah.
linked to, but those
You
are
also-
the three since it was legalized,
But you're
correct,
also,
though?
there's also the mental health issues. You talk to those who are working in mental health, will tell you about the changes they're seeing in
Well-
youth and young adults with mental health issues.
But I just want to clarify, there hasn't been rampant suicides and blamed on marijuana. There's been those three cases that remain still
Correct.
unsolved.
In addition to the poisonings
Okay.
of children and others, yeah.
We want to get to this side. What does the amendment do with regards to edible, non-traditional, if there is a traditional, way of consuming marijuana?
know that.
I guess.
Who are we kidding?
Yeah, but, so, we're talking, will we see candies here? Will we see the drops? Will we see the gummy bears, the brownies, the cookies?
Well, Mike, you're right. I mean, this notion of attempting to govern by anecdote is frankly silly. So what the amendment has done is put into place a recognition that Colorado's law wasn't working, so we're going to do it better. So I disagree with Bob on this notion that Colorado's not a lab. It is a lab. We've gotten a chance to see what some of the failings were in Colorado's regulatory system, and we've fixed them. For instance, in Section G of our amendment, it says the commission shall establish rules regulating the chemical content and/or potency of edibles, and it goes on, and the commission shall adopt a special division within the commission staffed with individuals with extensive experience in food and prescription drug regulation to assist the commission in promulgating industry-leading standards regarding the regulation of these edibles. And on top of that, it says the commission has the absolute authority to crack down on any manufacturer who is engaged in packaging or advertising in ways that create a substantial risk of attractiveness to children. We have devolved to the commission a significant amount of authority to ensure that the sorts of anecdotal things that are happening in Colorado will not happen in Ohio under this responsible framework.
Why not exclude edibles from your amendment altogether? Because I've seen the pictures, they look like they're packaged like Ghirardelli chocolates. Why not just have in tobacco or smoke form, pill form, things that are truly medicinal based rather than packaged like you'd see at a grocery store?
There are folks out there, I mean, we have edible medications. There are folks out there who
They're
need...
not packaged like chocolate bars, though. I mean, they have like, I guess...
We have to understand that what the Responsible Ohio Amendment does is regulates the entire industry. So you'll have chocolate bars that are regulated on one side, and you have medicines. If you say, forget about edibles, don't have any edibles, that's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You can regulate this in a responsible way to ensure that there's packaging that says, look, this is the THC content. This is what you're dealing with, Maureen Dowd, when you take this chocolate bar. Make sure, and we can have the sort of content that deals with the problem. It doesn't make sense to say, all right, throw all the edibles out, because we recognize that there are patients out there and patient advocates who have told us we need edibles for our kids with epilepsy and so on and so forth. So no, I don't think that works.
Getting to the medical marijuana, this amendment, if it gets on the ballot, and if it's passed, would legalize medical marijuana. If it was just medical marijuana, that you needed a doctor's prescription, would you support this amendment?
Well, first off, there is absolutely no state in the United States that has a prescription for marijuana. The FDA won't allow that. We do advocate for more testing on marijuana. We know that there are components in marijuana like cannabinoids, like cannabidiols, that actually could have medicinal properties with cancer patients, with those kids with seizures. And if they really cared about the medical piece of this, they would actually be in support of House Bill 33 and going through the FDA process and Epidiolex, but that hasn't been on their plate thus far. But the medical piece, if we're going to do medicine, there are some components of snake venom that are actually in blood pressure medications. You don't go out and get bit by the snake. Your blood pressure will drop. It's getting it back up. It's going to be the hell of a problem. We don't do that in raw form. We actually have a medical system, and my wife is from India. We have, and been there many times, we have the best medical system in the entire world to make sure that our people are safe, that they know the dosages, that they know what they're getting in their products, and that it's not just grown in some greenhouse in Fayette County or wherever else.
But that's the case now. This amendment would legalize it, regulate it, and it would become better regulated medicine.
Who says it's medicine? The FDA determines medicine, and they have not come out again. Are there components? Are there medicines in the system? Absolutely. Sativex is a great example. Should be on the market this year. Are there some compounds? There are 6 compounds right now going through the FDA process. Epidiolex, again, another cannabidiol-based medication for these children with seizures. So let's go through that process so that we can study it, we can make sure there are no long-term consequences, and that we know that every time what they're taking.
Ohioans, I think it's like 75 or 80% of Ohioans support marijuana for medical use. It's 50-50 on recreational use. Why not start with medical marijuana first?
Sure. I mean, it's really about 57%. We do polling every week. We've been polling since September. That's so we know what voters are believing and thinking and where they go. The Epilepsy Foundation believes that CBD marijuana is actually useful, it's helpful. There are a number of veterans who served overseas and have come back who have PTSD, who utilize marijuana rather than antidepressants and find it to be very helpful and not as addicting as the depressants that they are put on. There are a number of cancer patients, Alzheimer patients, Parkinson's patients that utilize marijuana and find it helpful, easing their pain and suffering, and especially with my grandmother who died from Alzheimer's, the anxiety that Alzheimer patients go through is tragic.
So why not help them first and then go to recreational?
Well, and if you go with Mr. Coder's approach to wait until or work on House Bill 33 that deals with less than 2% of all marijuana patients, then we could get to this idyllic world of medical marijuana in 2050? We've waited for 18 years now to get to nowhere with medical marijuana. It's been in the legislature, every General Assembly with Bobby Higgins pushing, and it's back again now. It's not getting anywhere. It is a better approach, we believe, at Responsible Ohio, to be honest with Ohioans, not do what, if you go the direction of medical marijuana, I'm sure our friends would say, that's just, you're trying to hide something. You're really going to go to personal use after this is over, because that's what every state's going to do. That's exactly what's going to happen.
I want to get to one more big issue, then we're going to go to questions. And the big issue I want to get to is this argument that this amendment would set up a monopoly. It's been described as a cartel. The amendment says that initially 10 growing facilities would be established around the state. The amendment also says that the commission in the 4th year, if demand is sufficient, can increase that number. But why set the number at 10 specifically in the amendment?
Well, let's put this in context. What Mike is talking about right now is Tier 1. This amendment approaches the industry from a 3-tiered system. Tier 1 deals with the growing and cultivation and extraction of the raw materials that get consumed by the public. So at Tier 1, you're dealing with the sort of zenith or apex of concerns related to public health and safety. You want to make sure that when this stuff is grown, it's grown in a very tightly regulated fashion, and that it's grown in a way that it isn't slipping out the back door. They call it diversion in Colorado and other places. So if you have 10 as opposed to 1,000, like you have in Colorado, you are able to focus your enforcement and regulatory resources on 10 entities as opposed to 1,000 entities. And it's a lot easier to catch, as the Rand Corporation said, it's a lot easier to catch a rogue operator with respect to 1,000 with respect to 10 than it is to catch a rogue operator in a system of 1,000. So at the tier 1, you have a very tightly regulated framework. Now, let's talk about this idea of monopoly cartel. These 10 compete with each other across the state on price, on quality, on quantity. There's no geographic, locations. They must compete across the state with respect to all of this. Now, when you get down to tier 2 and tier 3, you have tier 2, which is the manufacturing facilities, the processing. So if you look at this industry as within the next 5 to 10 years, 80% of it is in the edibles space and 20% of it is in the flower space. That means that 80% of the industry runs from tier 1 through tier 2 to be processed into whatever sort of products are made, and into tier 3, which is retail. We anticipate that at a fully grown market, there will be hundreds and hundreds of tier 2 facilities to meet all that demand, and there could be as many as 1,000 retail facilities to meet the demand. So what you're talking about right now are 1,500, 1,600 facilities that are wide open to any entrepreneur who's got a great idea and a license from the commission. And when you talk about the 10 at the grow facilities, what you're really talking about is giving yourselves the opportunity to tightly regulate this.
All right,
and if these folks, one last point, and if these folks don't follow the rules, if they don't follow the regulations, the commission replaces them and can start over.
Your reaction to the industry breakdown, how this would work in Ohio?
Yeah, this is like the AT&T store battling on Broad Street with the AT&T store up in Clintonville somewhere. It's the same industry. It's the same 10 folks that are getting together. This is absolutely a cartel. It's exactly the way that they're going to handle this, the same way that drug dealers do. There's language in this bill that would actually provide low-cost weed for low-income individuals. We know that what drug dealers do right now is they actually give people free weed, free pot, free heroin to get them hooked, because they have to build that customer base. They're not going to make money off of someone who smokes once a month. You're going to have a chronic user, someone who's using this all the time, just the same way that the cartels do it, just the same way that drug dealers do. So,
would Colorado's system be working better, Bob, if there were just 10 producers and more easily monitored and regulated?
No, again, you're just talking about the mass production of a drug.
But it's by 10 organizations rather than the 1,000.
We have no history. When we mass merchandise, mass produce a drug, we're going to create greater use. The legal drugs are the most used drugs. It's that simple. So you're not making it better by bringing in manufacturing facilities, regardless of how many, shops, branded products. Mass producing hash oil in just a few locations doesn't change that equation any. It still creates many of the problems we have. Okay. So, and if I can mention one other thing too about, if I just touch on this issue of medical, because this kind of, as a public health person, this is what can get me very upset. Angered is probably a better word. If any of you walked into a pharmacy today and the pharmacist said, hey, what kind of drug would you want today? We're having a special on Vicodins. How much would you want? The FDA would be there in 10 minutes. The media would be there in 15 minutes. Denver Post was recommending 80 marijuana strains for depression, 25 plus strains for bipolar, 25 plus for PTSD. Myself and 2 physicians wrote a letter to the Denver Post saying, please, for each of those medical recommendations, give us the dosage, give us the duration, give us the counterindications. Tell us, are you recommending they stop taking their other approved meds? Are they being screened for mental health issues, substance abuse issues? All the things you expect in a medical protocol. That does not exist. So when I talk to people, there's a difference between cannabis-based medicine, which there's value, and the medical marijuana movement, absent of any medical protocols. That is not a patient-focused system.
Okay. CMC's tradition is to take questions from the audience, little deviation from our normal procedure to keep it fair and balanced and not redundant. Our program committee has selected your written questions. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I asked this question on behalf of Cher Newfer and John McKnight, who have similar questions. And the question is, I agree that alcohol and tobacco have societal costs. Alcohol and tobacco kill thousands of people. What is the societal cost of marijuana use? It can actually save people's lives and have health benefits, and no one has ever died from overdose or continual use.
We'll start with you folks.
I agree.
Do you have any? I guess do you have any numbers? Any specifics? I don't want too many numbers, but any basic proof of why you agree?
Yeah, there's a significant amount of proof. There have been a number of studies conducted that back all that up. The one study that comes to mind right now is the study that was included in the U.S. District Court of California, the recent case that the judge called for evidence as to the medical efficacy of marijuana as compared to some peer group, and that peer group included ibuprofen, acetaminophen, aspirin, and the stuff that's in Robitussin. Somebody help me. What is it? Yeah, the stuff that's in Robitussin, whatever. And they did a ratio study of toxicity against the therapeutic dose, and they called it the therapeutic indicator. And so the Robitussin, the toxicity versus the therapy, was a 1-to-3, meaning that if you took the recommended dose, that would be therapeutic. 3 times that dose would be toxic, would be deadly. The one that surprised me was acetaminophen. It was very high as well. It was like 1-to-5. Ibuprofen was 1-to-7. Aspirin was about 1-to-15. Marijuana was 1-to-10,000. In other words, what that evidence before the District Court of California was saying is there is no toxic dose of marijuana. There isn't. And so when we hear these claims about how marijuana is causing all these deaths and fatalities, I would ask to see the studies.
So the costs, and again, here, this is why I say this is all deja vu for those of us who worked in tobacco. Our product causes no harm. Our product is not addictive. We're not targeting children. This is about social justice and freedom and rights. The truth is, unfortunately in Colorado, we have what I call marijuana industry math, all revenue, no expenses. We have people coming into our ERs, people coming into our hospitalizations. The number of times marijuana is appearing on ER charts has gone up exponentially from 8,000 just a few years ago now to 12,000 in our state. You have marijuana-positive DUIDs, marijuana-positive auto fatalities. We know the impact of marijuana on the brain. We know the growing evidence of marijuana impact on mental health issues. Talk to those who are working in the substance abuse field. We have a physician who said, 5 years ago, I would have told you marijuana wasn't even on my radar. Now I've got youth and young adults in here, cannabis-induced psychosis, serious mental health issues that we're dealing with. Those are costs. For the mother who comes up to me and says, I had the good student, I had the good athlete. Now they're using marijuana. I'm looking for a treatment facility, and I just hope they'll finish school. That's a major cost. We're learning more and more about marijuana's impact on the heart, just as we did with tobacco. We just had our 50th anniversary of the Surgeon General's report on tobacco, and we're still learning of what diseases are caused by tobacco. Science is a process, and science is an evolution. Marijuana is harming, is costing our state. In addition to the hash oil explosions, which are putting people in burn units, in addition to the children who are being poisoned and going to the ER, all of those are costs.
Next question.
I asked this question on behalf of Trip Lazarus, who actually mirrors a number of folks. I support legalization for medical and recreational use by adults, but I am concerned that this amendment will write a business monopoly into the Ohio Constitution. Can you put my concerns to rest?
Well, we covered that a little bit. To expand on your earlier statement, after 4 years, or in the 4th year, you can expand more than 10. Doesn't that give an unfair advantage to those 10 established growing facilities that have invested the capital, and it's going to be harder to get another business or to a business in if they so wanted to in 4 years with a 3-year head start?
Mike, let's look at what's happened in other states in Northeast or the northeastern parts of the country where they've had auctions, right? They've had a limited number of licenses go out, anywhere from 5 to 10 or 15 or 16. And those licenses get auctioned off by bureaucrats and state house people, and they're very limited in scope and nature. And let's not kid ourselves. Do you think that people that are contributing to those politicians aren't in some way benefiting? And are they benefiting in the light of day, or are they benefiting in the darkness of the state house? The other reality here is that you can't get a marijuana bill through the legislature. We've been trying again for 18 years. It's unrealistic to assume that the legislature is going to put an issue before the voters to require an auctioning of licenses. So if you are going to get to a point of having legalization, which again 57% of Ohio voters want for personal use, then the way to do that is to have direct democracy. And having that direct democracy in the light of day, with public input, with disclosure, with transparency, with an adult conversation about prohibition and its failure, and the alternatives, is a far better way to go forward. Does that give an unfair advantage? No, I think that it actually is just a realistic way that we get a change of law, because we cannot rely on the State House across the street to do it.
Getting to this monopoly issue again, I look at it, the car industry as kind of a similar thing. Yet there are, relative few manufacturers of cars, but there are more dealers. So there's plenty of competition. You can go to one dealer to negotiate between models, between even dealers on the same model. Wouldn't that happen with this amendment under the way it's proposed?
No, because all of the marijuana grown and sold would be by these 10 people. 10, I mean, you're talking
They're separate
about
companies.
They're all under one amendment. I mean, they are who they are. Plus, they're not really transparent about who they are, quite frankly. The piece about that is that we have, there are, quite frankly, there's products that are, national products. Does this also take into account that cannabis-based medications, because they're not grown with Ohio weed, would they be then illegal in the state of Ohio? You talk about they control everything. Nothing else is about, nothing can come in. It is this one named group of individuals who would have control over the entire industry. That's where the monopoly and the cartel comes into focus.
Next question.
This question's from David Axelrod. What advice, if any, can you give to participants in the lawful marijuana industry about security from federal prosecution, especially should the administration change to one hostile to the marijuana industry? And please comment on issues of federalism involved in a state-sanctioned marijuana industry.
To clarify, marijuana is still against the law federally. The DEA is choosing not to enforce it in the states where it's legalized right now.
Yeah, David, I mean, it's a great question. One of the initial risk disclosures in the SEC filings that I know that our funders put together was, if we do this, we may, face criminal sanctions. That is a recognition that is hanging over anyone who chooses to get involved in this industry, and it's a recognition that folks in Colorado and Washington and the Wild West of California also have to deal with. Now, as things are changing across the nation and changing very rapidly on people's understandings of how marijuana should be regulated and dealt with, there will be a harder and harder push from these states saying, allow the states to do this, let the 50 laboratories work through the process, and allow democracy to work. And to this point, we have seen the federal government take their cues from that. I have no reason to believe, as this movement continues on down this policy path, that the federal government will reverse its stance on taking a hands-off approach without a significant backlash from the state's own legislators.
You all want to respond to the federal government's involvement in this? What has been the federal government's response in Colorado? Is it you can't even ask, don't ask, don't tell. You know what's going on.
Is awful a bad word? I guess the way to describe it, because the federal government, again, it's it's a violation of federal law.
So they go after the black
And
market
So
folks?
what's that?
Do they go after the black market folks, the
No,
illegal
I mean,
sales?
that's the fiction. I mean, the administration said, okay, Colorado, if you, these things, they laid out a list of things. If these things start to happen, we're coming in. You know, if the black market is going, if kids are getting it, and we've met, I think, every criteria tenfold. And then nobody's arrived on a horse to come in and address the issue. So we have the problems that they said they were concerned about, and nothing's happened, so.
I think we have time for one more. Go ahead.
Also, from the workforce standpoint, this is where employers are having a tremendous issue across the nation. It is, which law are we following? You know, if we have a DOT contract, Department of Transportation contract, who have come out very strongly that you cannot have medical marijuana in your workplace. However, you have a medical marijuana state. How does that work for employers who are getting sued in other states? You're talking about Colorado with Brandon Coates. You're talking about Michigan. You're talking Maine, and also in New Mexico. So you've got lawsuits against employers trying to juggle this federal versus state law.
We have time for, go ahead.
To explain how that works in our amendment. I mean, Tony suggested concerns about this, employer issue. We address it head on. Section J4 says nothing in this section is intended to require an employer to permit or accommodate the use of blah, blah, blah marijuana.
Except, can I read the end of that? Except that a patient with a medical marijuana certification may self-administer the medical marijuana subject to the same conditions applied to administration of prescribed medications. So
you
they
bet.
can't smoke that. It also says nothing about impairment in this issue.
That's exactly right. To the extent that Chris Stock crane manufacturer has a prohibition on operating cranes with respect to OxyContin, that same prohibition would be in effect with respect to medical marijuana.
It's not said in the language.
Despite the fact that
All
this
right.
would be in a medical marijuana certification.
We'll leave this to the lawyers to figure out. One more question.
Sure. So this question comes from MetroCast, Lynn Stan there. And she asks, when looking at cannabis as an income source and to impact positively on agriculture, why is industrial hemp not included? Shouldn't it be the first stop?
We were actually asked by the hemp folks to not put it in the amendment, and we didn't. We specifically excluded it because the hemp industry asked us to do so, to not do so.
Okay. We've reached the end of our question and answer session, so we'll give each side 1 minute for closing statements. And again, by virtue of a coin toss, we are starting with you folks. You're first. Go ahead.
Thank you again for having us today. As you've seen, prohibition and scare tactics aside, the reality is as follows. Marijuana prohibition is a failure. Marijuana is being sold in every single county, all 88 of them in Ohio. It is untested, it is unregulated, and it is untaxed. In some instances, it is dangerous because you do not know what you're consuming. Drug dealers do not card your kids to see if they are of an appropriate age. They do not care. They want the money. They serve as the real gateway to harder narcotics in doing so. Ohio spends $120 million a year to enforce failure. Ohio marijuana prohibition disproportionately impacts people of color. A single marijuana misdemeanor conviction can have over 300 consequences, including affecting people who want to go to college and have FAFSA issues to deal with. We can and we must do better. And that requires that we have a responsible adult conversation, which I think we had today, with some disagreement and some, of course, but we need to discuss treating marijuana as we do alcohol.
Okay, we got to cut you off there. You folks.
First off, FAFSA is a federal program, so it wouldn't impact that at all. Secondly, I think we have to go back to balancing that this is a public health, this is an employee issue. That if we're going to protect those employers in this state, then we really need to take a hard look at this. We can't just commercialize and have the 7 or 8% that we have now who are smoking marijuana become 50%, which we have in alcohol. So you have that market, you're going to commercialize, you're going to have those issues, and the impacts are going to grow.
And just to say that in Colorado, we are the black market. Our marijuana is more potent than the black market. Our marijuana is branded. Our marijuana is mass-produced. Our marijuana is marketed at stores, and so that is not making our community safer. The long lists of costs of marijuana commercialization are much bigger now than they were when we had, quote, just the black market.
All right. Thank you all. To our panelists, I think that we learned something today, so thank you very much, and thank you for your questions.
I hope you enjoyed today's forum. We encourage you to continue the conversation in the lobby with coffee and brownies. And no, they are not, they are just brownies. Remember that you can view and share all of the CMC forums on CTV, Columbus Television, on WOSU and PBS affiliates statewide, with the Ohio channel, and anytime on CMC's website via YouTube. Let's thank our speakers again: Ian James, Chris Stock, Tony Coder, and Bob Doyle, and of course our mediator, Mr. Thompson. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you in the next CMC.